Ferrari's new wing is shocking everyone with a new benefit revealed. Mercedes and McLaren are turning it up for the final testing. And Ferrari's starts are insane. Let's get into the latest F1 news. And suddenly its rear wing doesn't just open like a conventional system. Instead, it literally flips upside down, rotating a full 180 degrees like something out of a science fiction movie. This isn't your typical active aerodynamic system, and it's already causing a massive stir throughout the paddock. While most teams have been playing it safe with traditional approaches to active aerodynamics, Ferrari has taken a completely different path. Instead of following the crowd with conventional opening mechanisms, they've engineered a system that rotates the upper wing elements through a complete inversion. Think of it like watching a gymnast perform a perfect backflip, except it's a rear wing doing it at over 200 miles per hour. This revolutionary design represents a fundamental shift in aerodynamic thinking. When most teams deploy their active systems, they're essentially creating a gap or opening in the wing structure. Ferrari's approach is entirely different. Their wing elements don't just open, they completely flip over onto their backs, reversing the entire airflow pattern in ways we've never seen before. The engineering challenges behind this innovation are staggering. Traditional active aerodynamic systems can rely on centrally mounted mechanisms, but Ferrari's rotating wing requires all the deployment hardware to be housed within the wing's end plates. This constraint alone would have deterred most teams, but Ferrari's engineers saw it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. What makes this design so fascinating from an aerodynamic perspective is how it completely transforms airflow behavior. When those wing elements flip over, the curvature that was previously directing air upward is now pushing it downward. The trailing edge becomes the leading edge, and everything we thought we knew about how that wing generates downforce gets turned on its head, literally. But here's where it gets really interesting from a technical standpoint. During the rotation process, there's a critical moment when the wing elements are positioned vertically. In this position, they're essentially acting like sails, creating unique aerodynamic effects that could either be beneficial or detrimental depending on how Ferrari has engineered the system. The traditional slot gap that exists between wing elements in conventional designs becomes dramatically larger when Ferrari's system is deployed. This enlarged gap, created by the inverted wing elements, potentially allows for much greater airflow disruption and drag reduction compared to standard systems. It's like the difference between cracking a window and removing it entirely. Other teams in the paddock reportedly considered similar rotating designs during their development phases, but ultimately decided against pursuing them. The perceived complexity and potential drawbacks led most manufacturers to stick with proven approaches. However, Ferrari clearly saw something others missed, or perhaps they had access to simulation data that made this radical approach viable within their specific aerodynamic package. The deployment speed and transition phases of this system present fascinating questions. How quickly can the wing rotate from its downforce generating position to its drag-reducing inverted state? More importantly, how rapidly can it return to generating downforce when a driver needs maximum grip for cornering? These transition periods could be crucial in determining whether this innovation provides a genuine competitive advantage. Ferrari's decision to pursue this unconventional path becomes even more intriguing when considered alongside their other aerodynamic innovations. The team has also introduced a blown exhaust flap system, and there's speculation that these two technologies might work in combination to create amplified aerodynamic effects that other teams simply cannot replicate. From a regulatory perspective, this rotating wing pushes the boundaries of what's currently permitted while staying within the rules. It demonstrates the considerable scope for innovation that exists within current Formula One technical regulations, proving that creative thinking can still find unexplored territories in what many considered a mature regulatory framework. The mechanical complexity required to achieve this rotation reliably at racing speeds cannot be understated. The system must operate flawlessly under extreme aerodynamic loads, temperature variations, and vibrations that would challenge any mechanical component. The fact that Ferrari has brought this system to testing suggests they have significant confidence in its durability and performance. Looking at the broader implications, this innovation could spark an aerodynamic arms race throughout the Formula One grid. If Ferrari's rotating wing provides a measurable advantage, other teams will be forced to reconsider their own active aerodynamic approaches. The development costs and time required to create competing systems could reshape team priorities and resource allocation. The visual impact of seeing this wing in action cannot be ignored either. Formula One has always been about pushing technological boundaries, and innovations like this capture public imagination in ways that incremental improvements simply cannot. When casual fans see a car's wing performing gymnastics at high speed, it reinforces Formula One's position as the pinnacle of automotive technology. Testing data will ultimately determine whether Ferrari's bold gamble pays off, but regardless of performance outcomes, this innovation deserves recognition for its creativity and engineering ambition. It represents exactly the kind of thinking that has made Formula One the world's premier motorsport laboratory for automotive technology. As we move forward through the testing phase and into the racing season, all eyes will be on Ferrari's rotating wing system. Will it provide the aerodynamic advantage the team is hoping for? Or will it prove to be an interesting experiment that doesn't translate to lap time improvements? Either way, Ferrari has already succeeded in demonstrating that there's still room for radical innovation in modern Formula One, and that's something worth celebrating regardless of the ultimate competitive outcome. Picture this. The Formula One paddock in Bahrain is buzzing with tension as teams push their revolutionary 2026 cars to the limit. But today, one young driver just stole the spotlight while veteran Fernando Alonso faced a nightmare that could define his team's entire season. Welcome back to the channel where we break down everything that matters in Formula One. What happened on this penultimate day of testing wasn't just about lap times. It was about proving which teams are ready for the new era and which ones might be fighting an uphill battle from day one. Mercedes rookie Kimi Antonelli didn't just set the fastest time, he sent a message that reverberated through every garage in the paddock. Let me paint you the complete picture of this dramatic day that had everything from stunning performances to technical disasters that left engineers scrambling for answers. The afternoon session started exactly how you'd expect from Max Verstappen. Within 30 minutes, the Red Bull driver was already at the top of the timesheets with a blistering 1 minute 33.444. That's nearly a full second faster than what Lando Norris managed during the morning running. Classic Verstappen, making it look effortless while everyone else was still finding their rhythm. But here's where things get interesting. Teams across the grid were playing musical chairs with their drivers during the lunch break. Mercedes swapped George Russell for Kimi Antonelli. McLaren brought in Oscar Piastri to replace Norris. Audi switched Gabriel Bortoleto for Nico Hülkenberg. Even Cadillac made changes, putting Sergio Perez in Valtteri Bottas's seat. These driver swaps aren't random decisions. They're calculated moves to extract maximum data from every precious minute of testing. Each driver brings different feedback, different driving styles, and different perspectives on how these radical new cars behave at the limit. Antonelli wasted no time getting up to speed. His first meaningful lap put him fourth, just 1 second behind Verstappen's benchmark. Not bad for a rookie stepping into one of the most complex racing machines ever built. Meanwhile, Hülkenberg was showing Audi's potential by slotting into 5th position early in the session. Then came the first drama of the day. Oscar Piastri found himself in serious trouble at turn 13, catching a massive slide in that long right-hander that could have ended very badly. The McLaren snapped sideways, but Piastri's quick reflexes saved him from a potentially expensive mistake. He managed to gather the car and head straight for the runoff area, his heart probably still pounding from the near disaster. These moments remind us just how challenging these new regulations are. The cars are heavier, the aerodynamics are completely different, and drivers are still learning the limits of what's possible. Even experienced racers like Piastri are discovering that these machines can bite without warning. But the real bombshell came 50 minutes into the session. Fernando Alonso, the two-time world champion who's seen everything in his illustrious career, suddenly found himself coasting to a stop at the exit of turn 4. The Aston Martin simply lost power, leaving Alonso stranded and triggering the red flags that would halt the session for 20 crucial minutes. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was a disaster for Aston Martin. a team already struggling with reliability after Lance Stroll caused the only red flag during Wednesday's running. When your testing program is constantly interrupted by breakdowns, you're not gathering the data needed to compete at the highest level. Honda quickly confirmed what everyone suspected. Alonso had suffered a power unit failure, and engineers were frantically trying to understand what went wrong. In the world of Formula One, power unit problems during testing can be ominous signs of deeper issues that might plague the entire season. The recovery took forever. 20 minutes might not sound like much, but in testing, every minute is precious. Teams have limited time to understand these revolutionary cars, and losing 20 minutes means losing valuable opportunities to perfect setups, understand tire behavior, and push performance boundaries. When the session resumed, something magical happened. Kimi Antonelli, the young driver many see as Mercedes' future star, immediately went faster. His improvement moved him to third position, just 4/10 behind Verstappen's benchmark. For a rookie in only his second day of Formula One testing, this was absolutely remarkable. But Verstappen wasn't done. The Dutch champion responded by lowering his own time to 1 minute 33.162, extending his advantage and reminding everyone why he's been so dominant in recent years. His ability to find speed when it matters most is simply extraordinary. Piastri wasn't backing down either. After his earlier scare, the Australian regrouped and managed to jump ahead of Antonelli into third place. His lap was just 4/10 slower than Verstappen, proving that McLaren's new car has serious potential when everything comes together. Meanwhile, Nico Hülkenberg was quietly having Audi's best day of testing so far. His time of 1 minute 33.987 was the fastest lap the German manufacturer had achieved, and he held on to fifth position with impressive consistency. What really caught everyone's attention was Audi's straight-line speed. Hülkenberg and Bortoleto were absolutely flying through the speed traps, hitting 341 and 337 kilometers per hour, respectively. Those are seriously impressive numbers that suggest Audi has found something special in their aerodynamic package. Speed trap numbers don't tell the complete story, but they're important indicators. In Formula One, straight-line speed often translates to overtaking opportunities and strategic advantages during races. If Audi can maintain this advantage while improving their overall lap times, they could be genuine contenders sooner than anyone expected. The session's momentum shifted dramatically 100 minutes in when Piastri delivered the knockout punch. His lap of 1 minute 32.861 was over 3/10 faster than Verstappen's previous best, putting McLaren right at the sharp end of the timesheets where they belong. This wasn't just about one quick lap. Piastri's time came on the same C3 tire compound that other drivers were using, making it a genuine like-for-like comparison. When drivers find speed on the same equipment, it usually means they've unlocked something fundamental about the car's potential. As the 2-hour mark approached, more drivers began chasing performance. Esteban Ocon posted his personal best for Haas, though the team seemed more focused on long-run data than outright speed. This approach makes sense during testing when understanding tire degradation and fuel consumption can be more valuable than headline lap times. Lewis Hamilton's afternoon was frustrating in every possible way. After being limited to just 5 laps during the morning due to technical problems, he suffered another setback with a big slide at turn 4 that sent him through the gravel. The 7-time world champion spent most of his time completing long runs, but even those were interrupted by what appeared to be rear brake issues. Franco Colapinto was having a much better time, improving to 7th position with 90 minutes remaining. The Alpine driver was finding consistent speed and seemed comfortable with the car's balance, which bodes well for the team's prospects in the new regulations. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. With 55 minutes left in the session, Kimi Antonelli unleashed the lap that would define the day. His time of 1 minute 32.803 on C3 tires was just 58 thousandths faster than Piastri, but it was enough to put Mercedes on top of the timesheets. Think about what this means. A rookie driver, in a car he's still learning, managed to extract the maximum performance when it mattered most. Antonelli's lap wasn't just fast, It was a statement that Mercedes has built a seriously competitive machine for the new regulations. Hamilton tried to respond on the same C3 tires, but his first attempt ended in disappointment. A lockup at the turn 8 hairpin forced him into the runoff area, ruining what could have been a strong lap time. He managed to improve to 5th position later in the session, but was still over a second behind his young teammate's benchmark. The closing stages saw everyone switching to softer tire compounds in search of ultimate performance. Sergio Perez finally made his first appearance after delays to Cadillac's afternoon program, while Alexander Albon explored the C5 tire's potential on the Williams. Franco Colapinto also switched to the C5 ES and found significant improvement, moving Alpine into 6th position and demonstrating the performance gains available from the softest compound. These tire tests are crucial for understanding what will be possible during qualifying sessions when every hundredth of a second matters. The day concluded with something completely different. For the third time, teams practiced the revised start procedure being proposed for the new season. These longer start sequences are necessary because removing the MGUH from the power units creates significant turbo lag that drivers must manage differently. Even this practice session had drama. Piastri's car stopped as he led the field from the pit lane, creating a moment of panic before he managed to get the McLaren running again. It's another reminder that these new power units are still being perfected. When the checkered flag finally fell, the timesheets told a fascinating story. Antonelli on top for Mercedes, followed by Piastri's McLaren just 0.06 behind. Verstappen's Red Bull was third, over 0.3 back, with Hamilton's Ferrari 4th and Norris completing the top 5 for McLaren. But looking beyond the raw times reveals even more intrigue. Antonelli completed 79 laps, showing that Mercedes has reliability to match their speed. Piastri managed 86 laps for McLaren, while Verstappen covered an impressive 139 laps for Red Bull, proving their car's durability even if it wasn't the fastest on this particular day. The real concern has to be for Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso. Finishing 15th, over 4.5 seconds off the pace, with only 68 laps completed due to the power unit failure, suggests serious problems that need immediate solutions. What does this all mean for the championship battle ahead? Mercedes appears to have nailed the new regulations, with both speed and a young driver who's adapting remarkably quickly. McLaren is right there with them, suggesting the battle at the front could be even more intense than we imagined. Red Bull might not have the fastest single lap, but their ability to complete long runs consistently could prove crucial during actual races. Meanwhile, Ferrari's problems with Hamilton's car are concerning, but we know this team has the engineering talent to solve issues quickly. Tomorrow's final day of testing will be absolutely crucial. Teams now have one last opportunity to fine-tune their setups, validate their data, and prepare for the season-opening race. The pressure is mounting, and every lap could determine championship hopes. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because we'll be covering every development from the final day of testing. The revolution in Formula One is just beginning, and you won't want to miss a single moment of what promises to be the most unpredictable season in years. I'll see you in the next one. Picture this. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, sits in his Ferrari cockpit for the first time and says something that should terrify every other driver on the grid. He looks at the new SF26 and declares it has his DNA in it. Not just any DNA, but the genetic code of arguably the greatest Formula One driver of all time. And if you think that's just poetic language, you're about to discover why this could be the most dangerous combination in motorsport history. What you're witnessing right now is not just another driver switching teams. This is the moment when Ferrari's legendary engineering prowess meets Hamilton's championship-winning intelligence. And the results from early testing are already sending shockwaves through the paddock. While other drivers are still figuring out their new cars, Hamilton is talking about a machine that carries his fingerprints in every aerodynamic curve and suspension setting. But here's what nobody is talking about yet, and it's the detail that could decide the entire 2026 championship before we even reach the first race. Hamilton didn't just show up at Ferrari and jump into a car someone else built. He spent 10 months in their simulator, 10 months working with their engineers, 10 months putting his championship-winning knowledge into a machine that's already showing blistering pace in pre-season testing. Think about what that means for a second. This isn't the Hamilton who inherited a difficult Mercedes and struggled through a podiumless season. This is a Hamilton who has rebuilt himself from the ground up, restructured his entire team, and now sits behind the wheel of a car he helped create. When he talks about feeling more connected to this Ferrari than any recent machine, that's not just driver speak. That's the sound of a perfect storm brewing. The evidence is mounting faster than lap times in qualifying. During practice sessions in Bahrain, Hamilton's race starts have been absolutely electric. We're talking about starts so good that rival teams are already expressing concern about Ferrari's launch capabilities. Remember, this is the same Hamilton who built much of his early career reputation on devastating first-lap performances. Now, imagine that killer instinct, combined with a car designed partly around his input. Ferrari's engineering team has never been shy about pushing boundaries, but what they've created for 2026 goes beyond their usual innovation. They've introduced a radical rotating rear wing system that's grabbing headlines and raising eyebrows throughout the Formula One community. This isn't just about aerodynamic efficiency. It's about creating a car that can adapt to different track conditions in ways that could provide crucial advantages during races. But the real story isn't just about the technology. It's about the psychological transformation Hamilton has undergone during his winter preparation. He's spoken candidly about rebuilding both his body and mind, about arriving at this season feeling better than he has in years. This is a driver who went through the humbling experience of a winless season and used it as fuel to reinvent himself completely. The changes go deeper than just personal fitness and mental preparation. Hamilton has restructured his entire support network, parting ways with his longtime manager and working with a temporary race engineer as Ferrari reorganized their technical structure. These aren't signs of instability. They're signs of someone committed to optimization at every level. What makes this situation particularly fascinating is Hamilton's long-term commitment to the Ferrari project. He didn't sign a short-term deal hoping for immediate results. He signed an extended contract because he understands that building championship-winning cars is a process that requires patience and sustained effort. This isn't a desperate gamble by an aging champion. It's a calculated investment by someone who knows exactly what it takes to win titles. The early reliability of Ferrari's new power unit adds another layer of confidence to this combination. While other teams are dealing with technical issues and interruptions during testing, Ferrari has been clocking significant mileage and consistently ranking near the top of timing sheets. Yes, testing times can be misleading, but when you combine strong performance with solid reliability, you're looking at the foundation of championship campaigns. Hamilton's relationship with his new team appears seamless in ways that many predicted would take much longer to develop. He speaks about having absolute faith in Ferrari's capabilities and describes their working relationship as better than ever. This isn't the honeymoon period talking. This is the voice of someone who has found the right environment for the final phase of his career. The competitive landscape of 2026 makes Hamilton's situation even more intriguing. With new regulations creating a more level playing field, his experience and racecraft become even more valuable. Younger drivers might have raw speed, but Hamilton brings something that can't be taught: the knowledge of how to manage races, handle pressure, and make crucial decisions in championship-deciding moments. Ferrari's technical innovations extend beyond the rotating rear wing system. They've developed what's being called a radical exhaust flap design that could provide significant advantages in the aerodynamic battles that will define the new formula. When you combine these innovations with Hamilton's feedback and development skills, you're looking at a partnership that could reshape the competitive order. The mental aspect of Hamilton's preparation deserves particular attention. He's talked about spending considerable time refocusing and getting to a better place mentally. This isn't just about confidence. It's about approaching races with the clarity and determination that characterized his most successful seasons. A mentally refreshed Hamilton in a car designed partly around his input represents a combination that should worry every other driver and team on the grid. What's particularly striking about Hamilton's comments is his emphasis on connection with the new car. After years of struggling with Mercedes machinery that never quite suited his driving style, he now has a Ferrari that carries what he calls his genetic fingerprint. This isn't just about setup preferences. It's about fundamental characteristics built into the car's DNA that align with how Hamilton approaches racing. The timing of all these elements coming together creates a perfect storm scenario for the 2026 season. Hamilton arrives refreshed and refocused. Ferrari provides him with innovative machinery developed with his input, and the new regulations create opportunities for teams to make significant leaps forward. When you add Hamilton's hunger to prove himself after a difficult final season at Mercedes, you have all the ingredients for something special. As we approach the first race of 2026, the question isn't whether Hamilton and Ferrari will be competitive. The early evidence suggests they absolutely will be. The real question is whether the rest of the grid is prepared for what happens when a 7-time world champion gets his hands on a car that truly suits his abilities. Based on what we've seen so far, that might be the most important question of the entire season. Picture this. It's February 2026. And Formula One is about to witness one of the most significant technical shakeups in decades. But lurking beneath the surface of these revolutionary new power unit regulations is a controversy that's been brewing for months, one that could potentially reshape the competitive balance before the season even begins. Today, we're diving deep into the compression ratio saga that has the paddock divided and the FIA scrambling to draw a definitive line in the sand. What started as a seemingly minor technical clarification has evolved into a full-blown political battle involving all 5 power unit manufacturers, with Mercedes apparently caught in the crosshairs. The stakes couldn't be higher as teams prepare for the most dramatic regulatory overhaul Formula One has seen in years. And a single vote could determine whether one manufacturer gains a crucial advantage or finds itself forced to redesign critical engine components just months before racing begins. Let me break down exactly what's happening behind closed doors and why this technical dispute has generated more heat than a turbo hybrid at full throttle. The controversy centers around something called geometric compression ratio, essentially how much the air-fuel mixture gets squeezed inside the engine cylinders before ignition. The 2026 regulations mandate this ratio must not exceed 16:1, a figure that was supposedly set in stone when the technical rules were finalized back in 2022. However, like many things in Formula One, what seems straightforward on paper becomes infinitely more complex in reality. The problem arose from what FIA single-seater director Nicolas Tombazis describes as a gray area in the regulations. Specifically, the rules didn't clearly specify whether compression ratio measurements should be taken at ambient temperature, basically room temperature, or at operational temperature when the engine is actually running hot. This might sound like a minor technicality, but in Formula One, such details can be worth significant performance gains. According to paddock sources, while all 5 power unit manufacturers can theoretically pass compression ratio tests regardless of temperature conditions, the spotlight has fallen squarely on Mercedes' high-performance powertrains. The implication is that Mercedes may have designed their power unit to exploit this regulatory ambiguity, potentially running higher compression ratios during actual race conditions while still meeting the technical requirements during standard testing procedures. The performance implications of this potential advantage are hotly debated. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff has downplayed the significance, suggesting any benefit might be worth merely 2 to 3 horsepower. However, Red Bull's Max Verstappen has scoffed at these figures, claiming the real advantage could be 10 times greater. In a sport where lap times are measured in thousandths of seconds, even a small power advantage can translate into significant competitive gains over a full race distance. To resolve this brewing controversy, the FIA has taken the unprecedented step of calling an electronic vote among the Power Unit Advisory Committee members. This committee consists of the 5 power unit manufacturers: Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull Powertrains, Renault, and Honda, plus the FIA and Formula One management. The vote will determine whether to introduce a new measurement protocol that requires compression ratio testing at operational temperatures rather than ambient conditions. The proposed change wouldn't take effect immediately if approved. Instead, the FIA has set an August 1st deadline, coinciding with the Hungarian Grand Prix. This timing is crucial because it gives manufacturers several months to make any necessary adjustments before the regulation becomes enforceable. However, it also means that if the vote passes, any team running non-compliant engines during the early races would need to modify their power units by the summer break. For the proposal to succeed, it needs a supermajority. 6 out of 7 committee members must vote in favor. If achieved, the matter then goes to the World Motorsport Council for final ratification. This democratic approach means the FIA isn't unilaterally imposing changes, but rather seeking consensus from the affected parties. The August implementation date represents what Tombazis calls a balanced approach. The FIA didn't want to force immediate changes at the season's start, recognizing that manufacturers have invested significant time and resources developing their power units based on their interpretation of the existing regulations. However, they also didn't want to allow what they perceive as an unintended regulatory loophole to persist throughout the entire season. This situation highlights a fundamental challenge in modern Formula One regulation. The FIA employs perhaps 15 to 20 people focused on technical regulations, while each team and power unit manufacturer has hundreds of engineers specifically tasked with finding performance advantages. As Tombazis explains, it's inevitable that new regulations will contain areas where clever solutions emerge that push beyond the intended spirit of the rules. The human element in this controversy cannot be ignored. Tombazis acknowledges that Formula One's competitive intensity can cause people to lose perspective, comparing it to arguing over a backgammon game but multiplied by 1,000. The passion and stakes involved mean that technical disputes often become emotional battles, with each side convinced of their righteousness. From Mercedes' perspective, they appear to have identified and exploited a legitimate interpretation of the regulations. In a sport that prides itself on being the pinnacle of automotive technology and engineering innovation, finding such advantages has traditionally been rewarded rather than penalized. Toto Wolff's apparent frustration with the governance process reflects this engineering meritocracy mindset. However, the FIA's position focuses on regulatory intent rather than strict literal interpretation. When the compression ratio limit was established, the clear objective was maintaining the 16:1 ratio during actual racing conditions. If ambient temperature testing allows higher operational ratios, then the regulation isn't achieving its intended purpose. The timing of this controversy is particularly significant given that power unit homologation occurs on March 1st. After this date, manufacturers cannot make architectural changes to their engines except under very specific circumstances. If the vote passes and changes are required, affected manufacturers would need FIA approval for necessary modifications, which would be granted under the regulatory amendment provisions. These potential changes would fall under the newly introduced power unit manufacturer budget caps, adding another layer of complexity. However, Tombazis suggests any required modifications would likely be relatively minor, involving adjustments measured in millimeters rather than wholesale redesigns. The technical reality is that compression ratio adjustments can often be achieved through relatively straightforward engine calibration changes. The broader implications of this dispute extend beyond the immediate technical issue. It represents a test of Formula One's governance structures and the balance between innovation and regulatory compliance. How this situation resolves could set important precedents for handling future technical controversies under the 2026 regulations. The democratic voting process itself is noteworthy. Rather than making unilateral decisions, the FIA is allowing the affected manufacturers to determine the outcome. This approach acknowledges that power unit development represents massive investments and that changes shouldn't be imposed without industry consensus. Looking ahead, the vote's outcome will significantly impact championship preparation strategies. If the proposal passes, any manufacturer potentially affected would need to factor modification time and costs into their development programs. If it fails, the status quo continues. But questions about regulatory fairness and competitive balance would likely persist. The controversy also underscores the complexity of modern Formula One power units. These are among the most sophisticated internal combustion engines ever built, incorporating hybrid technology and operating under extreme conditions. Small technical details that might seem insignificant to outsiders can have profound performance implications when multiplied across race distances and championship campaigns, regardless of the vote's outcome. This situation demonstrates the ongoing challenges of regulating Formula One's technical development. The sport's fundamental tension between innovation and equality continues to evolve, requiring constant vigilance and adaptation from governing bodies. The compression ratio dispute ultimately reflects Formula One's DNA as a technology showcase where engineering excellence is both celebrated and scrutinized. As the sport prepares for its most significant regulatory revolution in years, how this controversy resolves will provide important insights into the balance between competitive innovation and regulatory integrity that will define the 2026 era and beyond. With the vote deadline approaching and teams finalizing their power unit preparations, the Formula One community awaits a resolution that could influence competitive dynamics for years to come. Whatever the outcome, this technical battle has already demonstrated that even in an era of strictly controlled regulations, the pursuit of marginal gains continues to drive innovation and controversy in equal measure. Formula One just dropped the most explosive revelation about what we can expect in Melbourne, and it's going to shock every racing fan. Carlos Sainz just issued a warning that could completely change how we view the upcoming Australian Grand Prix, and the implications are absolutely staggering. Picture this scenario. You're watching qualifying in Melbourne, and instead of seeing 20 cars separated by mere tenths of seconds like we've grown accustomed to, you witness a massive 3-second gap from first to last. That's not speculation anymore. That's a very real possibility according to Williams driver Carlos Sainz, and the reasoning behind his prediction reveals a troubling reality about Formula One's latest regulatory revolution. The sport just underwent one of its most dramatic overhauls in history, completely transforming both the chassis regulations and power unit specifications. We're talking about shorter, lighter machines equipped with active aerodynamics and revolutionary engines that split power equally between electrical and combustion systems, now running on fully sustainable biofuel. This wasn't just a minor tweak. This was Formula One hitting the reset button harder than ever before. But here's where things get interesting and slightly concerning. When the dust settled after the first major testing session in Bahrain, the results painted a picture that has divided two Williams teammates on what Melbourne will actually deliver. The timesheet read like a familiar story. Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari dominating the top positions, with Red Bull represented by their young driver, Isaac Hadjar. The Big Four teams occupied 7 of the top positions, separated by less than a second, which sounds competitive until you realize what happened below that line. Carlos Sainz found himself in 8th position, driving the Williams FW48. But here's the crucial detail that changes everything. He wasn't just 8th, he was the first driver to be more than a full second slower than George Russell's pace-setting time. That gap measured 1.654 seconds, and he was 0.8 slower than Lewis Hamilton in 7th place. When you extrapolate this pattern across the entire grid, the implications become clear and somewhat alarming. The most dramatic example came from Sergio Perez in the Cadillac, who ended up slowest of all drivers, sitting 4.732 seconds off the ultimate pace. That's not a small gap. That's a chasm that would make qualifying sessions look more like time trials, where some cars are racing in completely different categories. Alex Albon, Sainz's Williams teammate, offered his perspective on this developing situation, and his analysis reveals just how fragmented the grid could become. He explained that while previous seasons featured what fans called Formula 1.0 and Formula 1.5, essentially 2 distinct performance tiers, this year could witness an unprecedented 4-tier system. Imagine the top teams in their own stratosphere, followed by an upper midfield group, then a lower midfield category, and finally, the strugglers at the back. This fragmentation represents a fundamental shift in how competitive sessions might unfold. Instead of the nail-biting qualifying battles where every position matters and lap times are separated by hundredths of seconds, we could be looking at clear performance gaps that make certain grid positions almost predetermined before cars even hit the track. Science, however, brings historical perspective to this discussion, referencing the situation back in the early regulation change periods. He recalled how significant gaps between teams were not uncommon during major rule shifts, pointing to specific examples where first place to 20th in qualifying was separated by over 4 seconds. His expectation is that while the gaps might be substantial initially, they probably won't reach those extreme levels, settling somewhere in between historical precedents and recent competitive seasons. The contrasting viewpoints between the Williams drivers highlight the uncertainty surrounding Melbourne's qualifying session, where science suggests all drivers could fall within a 3-second window. Albon expresses serious doubts about even achieving that level of competitiveness. His prediction is far more conservative, suggesting that perhaps only 2 cars will be separated by half a second, which would represent a dramatic departure from recent Formula One qualifying sessions. This disagreement isn't just about numbers. It reflects deeper concerns about what these new regulations have accomplished. Science expressed genuine frustration about the negative impact of regulatory changes, particularly when compared to the incredibly tight competition witnessed in recent races. He specifically mentioned how exciting it was during the final races of the previous season, knowing that all drivers were separated by mere tenths of seconds, creating genuine uncertainty about qualifying and race outcomes. The emotional weight of his comments reveals a driver's perspective on what makes Formula One truly compelling. When 20 cars can realistically fight for pole position because they're separated by negligible time differences, every session becomes unpredictable, and every driver has a legitimate chance to surprise. That level of competition creates the kind of drama and excitement that keeps fans on the edge of their seats throughout entire weekends. But regulatory resets, while necessary for various technical and competitive reasons, often destroy that delicate balance temporarily. Teams with superior resources, better development capabilities, or simply fortunate interpretation of new rules can establish significant advantages that take considerable time for competitors to overcome. This natural consequence of major changes means that short-term competition often suffers in favor of long-term competitive evolution. The Bahrain testing results suggest we're witnessing exactly this phenomenon. The established powerhouse teams have seemingly adapted more effectively to the new technical requirements, while smaller operations struggle to extract maximum performance from completely different machinery and power systems. This isn't necessarily a permanent situation, but it could define the opening portion of the championship. What makes this situation particularly intriguing is how it might affect race strategy and weekend dynamics. If qualifying gaps are indeed substantial, traditional qualifying tactics become less relevant, and teams might focus more heavily on race pace optimization. Drivers who historically relied on superior qualifying performances to compensate for slightly inferior race pace could find themselves struggling to maintain competitive positions. Furthermore, the psychological impact on drivers and teams cannot be understated. Knowing that certain grid positions are realistically unattainable before even attempting a qualifying lap changes how drivers approach sessions and how teams allocate their limited practice time and resources. The broader implications extend to fan engagement and television spectacle. Formula One's recent surge in popularity has been partially attributed to increased competitiveness and unpredictable outcomes. If Melbourne delivers the kind of spread that Sainz and Albon are predicting, it could represent a temporary step backward in terms of pure sporting entertainment, even if the technical innovations are genuinely impressive. However, this situation also presents opportunities for dramatic storylines. When performance gaps are significant, any driver or team that manages to exceed expectations creates a much more impactful narrative. A midfield team scoring points or achieving an unexpected qualifying result becomes genuinely remarkable, rather than merely noteworthy. As we approach Melbourne, These predictions from Williams drivers serve as a reality check about what Formula One's latest evolution might deliver in terms of immediate competitive balance. While the technical innovations are undoubtedly impressive and represent important steps toward sustainability and advanced engineering, the short-term competitive consequences might require patience from fans expecting the tight battles that characterized recent seasons. The Australian Grand Prix qualifying session will provide the first definitive answer to these predictions, and the results will likely set expectations for how the championship battle unfolds throughout the season.